Welcome to Stress-Free IEP. You do not need to do it all alone. With your host, Frances Shefter, Principal of Shefter Law. You can get more details and catch prior episodes at www.shefterlaw.com. The Stress-Free IEP video podcast is also posted on YouTube and LinkedIn, and you can listen to episodes through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. Now, here's the host of Stress-Free IEP, Frances Shefter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. For those that are joining us live on our special recording time or our special live show time. Today's guest is Jen Dreyer, who is a parenting coach for parents of neurodivergent children, and also known as Orchid Kids. So Jen, introduce yourself a little bit more. Tell us a little bit about parenting coaching.
So my name is Jen Dreyer again. I came to this work probably about 5-6 years ago now. Part of it was because I have an orchid kid myself. We realized when my now 12-year-old was about a little under 1.5, we realized something was going on, and got some help from my husband's aunt, who's works with hearing impaired kids, and guided us through this process of getting him tested and all this stuff. And I was like, how come nobody else told me about any of these things? And he was able to get these amazing free services from DC. We live in DC. And so, and it was, I was just amazed. And he made this tremendous progress. I mean, he went from 50% behind in speech when he was tested at 17 months, and 50% behind in speech, 50% behind in social emotional stuff, like really behind, really, really behind. He went from 50% to 10% in 1 year. And I was like, just shocked at how powerful early intervention is and how much I really wanted to tell more parents about it. I come from an education background. So I was a teacher for 9 years in New York City public schools. And then I was a literacy coach. So I helped teachers, and then I worked with new teacher mentors. So I came from it with an education background, and so sort of wanted to figure out, like, I like the coaching part. And then I teamed up with, when I started doing this work a little bit on my own, but realized I really wanted to find someone I could do this with. And so a mutual friend connected me to Gabrielle Nicolay, who runs Speech Kids Therapy Center. And we were both trying to work with parents and kind of from different angles. And so we came together and realized that, so I had done this program with Max when he was younger through DC called Hannon, which was wonderful. Some people may know about it, some people may not. It's great. I mean, I highly recommend it. They had a very intensive version of it. And then I'd also come from my older son. I have a now 14-year-old who we figured out later has ADHD. That we were having struggles with him. And so I'd gone for him. I went to PEP, Parent Encouragement Program. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They're wonderful.
I have a friend that actually works for PEP.
Yeah. And so I did all the classes at PEP I could do. And I was like, wait, but there's no like version of PEP for parents of neurodivergent kids. For like, we figured out that Max had autism, his autistic ADHD, which came out a little bit later. But we figured this out really early, like by age 3, we knew that he had all these things, and he was getting lots of support, which has been great. And so Gabrielle and I came together and decided to create a like PEP meets Hannon, basically, class that we started in, I don't know if it's fortuitous or non-fortuitous, but we started our class March 1st, 2020 in person. So we quickly shifted to online, on Zoom. And we've been doing it ever since. And it's been really, I mean, on some level, we're so grateful that actually we do it on Zoom now, because we've had people from really different parts of like all over the world to have come through our classes. We had some people from Bali who are coming like 12 hours later, which was amazing. Some people from the UK. We had someone from Ghana, certainly across the country, like, from here to California. Lots of folks who have found us. And that's, sort of what we're trying to do is, that we really strongly believe that the more people, that get support, the better the world will be, really, whether it's through us or through anyone else. Like that rising tide lifts all ships is a big mantra that we champion. So anyway, so Gabrielle and I together created a course and a program called Raising Orchid Kids. And we started out with this now 8-week class. That's practical strategies. We wanted to give people really practical ways to come away with understanding their children's behavior, um, sort of reducing all the chaos and the stress and the feeling of overwhelm that can come with having kids in general, but having neurodivergent kids is like, multiplied many, many times. And also it feels very lonely. So we are, strive to, create community, but also give parents really practical strategies and sort of a shift in understanding and perspective on what's going on neurologically for their kids. And how that shows up behaviorally, and why, and what we can do to kind of mitigate that in a meaningful way. That's, we're big proponents of neurodiversity affirming support, that we want to,
Yeah.
these are our kids who are in front of us. Like, we're not going to make them into someone else or something else. We can't do that. We have to accept and love and take care of who's in front of us, and help them find their ways to move through the world as smoothly and happily as possible.
And I love that because, as a parent of 2 neurodivergent children also, it's lonely. It's hard because, you have, of course, relatives, friends, well-meaning, all of them. Well, you need to do this or you need to do that. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, not with a kid with this diagnosis. That's not going to work.
Right. Right.
And yes, you might say put in structure, but for some kids, the structure is not a good thing. It's worse.
So true.
So
it is so true.
depends on it, right? Like, it depends on what the brain, how the brain works. And that's how I always explain it. When I got both of my girls tested, I always told them, we're just going to find out how your brain works, because all of our brains work differently, and let's figure out what works and what doesn't. Like, demanding things from my kids will never work. Absolutely positively never. It's just you're gonna shut down. But if you give them okay, you don't want to brush your teeth. Okay, so then we're not allowed to eat candy or ice cream or sugary things, or even milk. So we'll have to cut all those things out. So to help protect your teeth. What are they going to do? They are 2 seconds in brushing those teeth, right?
Yeah, it's funny. Even so, with like brushing teeth, we had this one parent who came through one of our classes who was really with a toothbrushing. Toothbrushing is like always this sticking point. I feel like for kids and for orchid kids, and there's like it's sensory stuff. You're like in there, it's uncomfortable. It's got a strong taste. Like, there's all kinds of things going on. And she was her orchid, I think it was like 10 or 11 at the time. She didn't get the right toothpaste, and so he was flipping out and didn't want to brush his teeth. And she's, you have to brush your teeth. You have to. And it was this whole fight. And I was like, well, maybe, like, what if you just like brush your teeth without toothpaste tonight? And she was like,
right.
What? Like, you can do that? Sometimes like the little tiny places where we can be flexible to allow our kids to, to feel seen, I think is so important. To feel seen and feel validated in the things that are making them feel uncomfortable, or the things that they want that they may not be able to have access to. Those are the ways, I think, whenever we can help them in that way, that validation goes a long way.
Yeah. And it's funny you say, because like, I just think of all the power struggles that parents get into. My era of growing up is you did what your parents said because your parents told you to. Like, that was it,
Right.
Backhanded, lost it, like whatever. It was just a different era. And nowadays it doesn't totally work that way. And it's us as parents that have to kind of readjust and rethink about why we do things, why we're doing this, why we're making that. I remember one time with my daughter her flip-flops were hurting her feet and she didn't want to wear them, but we were at a hotel and going down and I'm like, you have to wear your shoes. She's like, but I don't want to. And then I went, wait a minute. Why does she have to wear her shoes? Really, okay, carry them with you just in case you change your mind, but go ahead. Like, it was, but in my head, rules are, but you know what?
Yes.
Are they rules? Or are they not rules? Kind of thing. And does it really matter?
It's so true. We always tell parents, like, go down that, like why, like, ask yourself why, like 4 to 5 times, like keep going there. I mean, it's like what our kids did when they were letting you want to like bang your head against the wall, but it's for a good cause this time. But you're like, why do you have to wear your shoes? Why does she have to wear her shoes? You know what? Because it seems like that's what we're supposed to be doing. But like, why does it seem like that's what we're supposed to be doing? And then you can keep going down that, and you're like, actually, you know what? Like, we can shift.
Right. Or you come, I mean, and then in the alternative, you come to the why and explain the why to your child,
Mm-hmm.
and then it makes sense to them. Like, well, the reason we want to wear our shoes is because we're going out on black hot,
Mm-hmm.
blacktop, and it's gonna be really hot, and you might burn your feet.
Yeah. Or there's
So
like something gross on the floor and you don't want to step on it or something,
right. And then so now we have a why, but if that doesn't bother them, then okay, go. You know what I mean? Like, but obviously with safety, you have to be in your car seat because
Mm-hmm.
that's the law and that's
Yeah.
the safety issues,
Right. Right.
and finding that. So like, what are some of the common misunderstandings that parents have with kids' behaviors?
I think a lot of what we see often, and I think which is so common and sort of touches so much on what have been saying already, that, we come with a lot of sort of like underlying thoughts about what our kids are
Right.
thinking and doing, or how they're supposed to be doing things. And so I think a lot of times when kids are struggling with something, right, and they're not doing what we want them to do, and they're not, quote unquote, listening, right?
Right.
Often it's not like they're not doing this out of, I think parents often find that like, sort of identify it as defiance. Um, and it's so rarely actually defiance. I mean, maybe sometimes, but very, very, it's like a rare case where it's actually defiance. More of the time, it's just like, I can't do it right now. Right. So there's something getting in the way of your child doing that thing right now. And so our job, so we try to shift parents kind of perception of defiance and, sort of that bad behavior thing. It's like behavior is not bad, or, I mean, it's maybe less desirable and more desirable, right? I
Right.
mean, obviously there's bad behaviors, like hurting someone,
Right.
like we don't want that. But really behavior is communication. And so that's the big message that we try to drive home to parents. And that behavior is telling you something. And so it's our job as parents to kind of put on our, sleuthing hat and become a detective and figure out, what's going on. And so we have this visual we've created that is, not a new concept at all. This has been talked about by Mona Delahook and Ross Greene and all the people who've written many wonderful books about parenting kids whose brains work differently than their neurotypical peers. But this idea of that behavior iceberg, and so we try to, help parents understand there's so much going on underneath the water, underneath what you see in the top of the behavior. And sometimes it's really hard to understand what that is, and it's hard to identify what those things are. But the more we try, right, to get underneath, like instead of just putting the band-aid on top of the behavior and fixing that thing on top, let's fix what's actually triggering it, right? Or I get to the bottom of what's triggering it, so that then you can start to go like, oh, the loud sounds make you feel totally, your brain like, is really upset when it's loud sounds. Okay, when we go out, we're going to take a pair of headphones with us so that we know if that sound gets loud, you can just put those on and that feels safer and better for you and your body. But that idea that, we want to help parents understand, like, there's ways to help kids solve for those things, predict those things. Most of these issues that come up tend to be predictable, even if like the scenario is unpredictable. Like I have no way to predict like when a fire truck's going to come by my street, but I
Right.
do know that the fire truck sound is jarring for my child and might trigger, a meltdown or like a big feelings. So, I know, oh, it's a fire truck. Oh, that's hard. That's scary. I'm going to validate. I'm going to give, so we sort of give parents some good solutions for kind of how do you deal. And that takes a lot of practice. But, the more we can practice, the more we can kind of shift. There's a couple of things that we always joke are like mantras that they should write and like tattoo on their arms. Um, like one of them being that Ross Greene quote that I really love, that kids do well when they can. Right.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that is just like the bottom line for all of it,
Mhm.
And so if they're not doing well, then they don't have the skills or the supports to do better, right? So they don't have the skills to navigate that loud sound without something to help muffle that sound for them, for example. But so that I
And
think is
it's
is a big piece.
Yeah, and I wasn't saying that you're validating it instead
Hmm.
of like, I know a lot of times people will be like, it's not scary, it's just a fire truck, it's going
Yeah,
to help people. But it is scary for that child. To tell
yeah.
a child it's not scary is saying that your feelings are wrong. basically, and not the way you want to go. You want to be like, you're 100% right. That sound is scary. Let's figure out a way to make it less scary.
Yeah. And I think, the other piece that we always want to drive home is that so much of it is just that our kids' brains, so especially kids who are neurodivergent, our brains are what, Mona Delahook calls like having a faulty neuroceptive system, which is like this idea. Our neuroception is like our perception of safety and danger. And they find danger in like all kinds of places that we would never think was dangerous. Like, I just offered you the blue cup. Like, why is that dangerous? Like, instead of the red cup, like, that is not a dangerous item. But their brain is like, no, that's not right. And so it's like their danger signals are flashing. And even though it, obviously to our very fully formed brains, our fully formed prefrontal cortex is like, that does not seem to make any sense. But to theirs, that's sort of what it is. And so when we can figure that out, like, okay, they need to have choice, like something like that. Like, so figuring out, I think, one of the big things that we try to help parents do is to find what we call the right antecedent intervention, the right thing to do ahead of time, to set them up. Like, what can you do to set them up to have a good experience? Like, moving through the world in general, but like, in specific situations, like, what can we do to set them up? Like an IEP would in theory, right? To like set them up to have a good, in theory, to set them up to have a good experience in school, right? What do we need to, what accommodations would they need in order for school to feel safe, and to feel supportive for them, and like a place where they feel
I
regulated.
love that you say in theory, because as we know,
Yes, yes,
it is. I mean, there are, but it's, it's funny that you say that, because I've told clients what I always recommend is the beginning of the school year to have a parent-teacher conference and be like, okay, so I know you have my 35-page IEP for my child, but these are the key factors. Like my daughter, everybody knows, and at the beginning of the year, all of her teachers know she needs a small, tight place. For when she gets dysregulated, she just needs to go like under the desk, wherever she is. So let's identify the place at the beginning. When she's dysregulated, she's going to go there and just let her be. You know what I mean? So like, it's what's the most important thing that you need to help your child. So it's, so yeah, in theory, because you know what, teachers are overloaded, as you know, you're a former teacher also. Like, you have 25 kids in your class and 7 of them are in IEPs, if not more, and, reality check. So,
and then some of them are just on 504s and they're not like, they don't qualify for an IEP, but they actually like need all kinds of supports and stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, I know, which we're actually, Gabrielle and I are trying to figure out a way to kind of develop some ways to support teachers too. And kind of, I mean, I know there's lots of stuff out there, but on how to do some professional development on, just better understand. I mean, despite the fact that there's a lot out there, there's a lot of teachers that still, just don't really know.
Because they're not taught. Your gen ed teachers are not taught anything about neurodivergent children.
No, I mean, I did look. I have a master's in curriculum and teaching from Teachers College Columbia. I don't think I took one class around, teaching kids with special needs. And that was it, and it was very basic, very, very basic. It was not about understanding executive functioning. It was not about like, the details, the nitty gritty of how do you scaffold and how do you really support kids that need extra.
Right. And it's so frustrating, because I remember, so my undergrad was in early childhood and then my master's was in special ed. And I remember in my special ed classes learning these strategies. I'm like, why don't they teach this to general ed teachers? Because it sounds like a best teaching practice.
Yes.
And if you do that, you don't need necessarily the IEP because you're doing this naturally.
Yes. Oh, we say this all the time. This is like, exactly. I mean, so we always say this to our parents, like, look, all the supports that you put in place for neurodivergent kids are mostly like 90% of the time going to be great for every kid, right? Like, for my son Max, so he's 12 now, but when he was younger and we would travel somewhere, especially if it was like a new novel experience, I would write these social narratives, like where I would spend a lot of time putting the pictures in and doing all these things. And here's where we're going. And this is what your bed is going to look like. And we're going to go on this airplane and all the stuff. And it was really helpful for him. And I was showing it to someone, they're like, that would be great for my neurotypical kid. Like just to, half of
Oh
these
yeah.
things are really good for just managing expectations for kids in general. My older son, when he was at our local public school in second grade, and his wonderful second grade teacher, and he was not diagnosed with anything at that point. He, like a year later, got an ADHD diagnosis that was just an inattentive. But his teacher, it was really awesome, put out for the entire class like headphones. Anyone who wants to during like individual work time, anyone who needs noise canceling headphones, like go ahead, go take it. And you go into his class, and like 50% of the kids were just having headphones on while they were working. And it was just like so great, because you're not only destigmatizing wearing
Yeah,
headphones
you're
to find more
normalizing it.
quiet, you're normalizing it. And you're also helping teach kids a little bit of metacognition, right? Understanding your brain. Like, what does your brain need right now? Oh, my brain actually, like, yeah, that bothers me. Okay, I'm going to like advocate for myself and get something that's going to help my brain do better in this situation. Um, so I was
Yeah,
a
it's
big
funny that you
fan.
say that with the social history. My youngest one, if she could stay home with me 24/7, she would be extremely happy. And
Uh-huh.
so it's probably, I mean, she has anxiety, but like she doesn't always want to leave the house. And I mean, like this is talking about like going to friends' birthday parties too. Like she
Yeah.
just doesn't want to. And like for her, I'm like, okay, I understand you don't want to go, but you know what? We already bought the present. Can we just go and drop off the present? And then we can come home. And she's, oh, usually like, okay, fine. But
Hmm.
as soon as we get there and drop off the present, one of her
Hmm.
friends comes and gives her a hug, and she is off and running and playing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like getting over that one hump of the anxiety of the unknown. Um,
Yeah, but I think what's so important is the way that you just validated it. Like, like,
yeah,
yeah, I know, God, yeah, yeah, that feels hard. Hey, let's just do this since we bought the present already. Like, so that we're just, like, let's just make this really chill and really easy. And you're just, it's like feel safe the way you're saying it. Like, just instead of like, can't you, it's like the same thing with like, can you imagine a child who's, tried out soccer and like hates it and is miserable going to soccer, and it causes meltdowns and tantrums. And you're like, oh, but lots of parents have this idea that like, well, if we started something, we have to finish it, or like I paid for it, so we have to. And again, like that's where we go down the whys again,
right.
and we're like, okay, we're learning something. This is something we're learning, right? Like this kind of soccer thing is not the right fit. In that same way that like, sometimes going to birthday parties like doesn't feel good, right? And
Yeah,
that's okay, and that's okay. And sometimes we can just go drop off the present. And you know what? Sometimes you drop off the present and she's like, okay, I'll stay. But sometimes you drop off the present and she's like, no, no, I'm done. I got to get out of here.
right.
Um,
Exactly.
and this is the other, like one of the other kind of misconceptions, a big one that we try to help parents kind of debunk, is this idea that if you do it once, then you know how to do it and you can always do it. Because with neurodivergent kids in particular, but I mean kids in general, but especially neurodivergent kids, that the performance inconsistency is so real, that just because I tied my shoes yesterday, like today, like my brain feels overwhelmed, and I am like, my lid is like close to being flipped, and I can't have anything that feels hard right now. And even though I did it yesterday, it still feels hard. So I need you to do it today. Um, so kind of that idea of understanding, that today might not be the day that they can do it. Sometimes you can, and you got to get good at reading your kids to say like, are
Right.
they just trying to get me to do it, or is it that they actually feel like they can't today?
Right.
Um,
It's interesting
so
you say that. I was on Instagram, and I don't remember who it was, but there was somebody talking about like two of her kids were off at school, and she was getting ready to leave with the younger one, and she saw the little one was just there about to cry. And she's like, "What's going on?" And he just looked at her. And then she goes on and says she just hugged him. And she's like, "It's
mhm,
okay. Are you just feeling empty, like you have nothing else?" And he shook his head yes. And she said she's telling him the story about how she just held him. And a
mhm,
couple minutes later, like, do you feel full yet? No. Okay.
mhm,
And she's like, nothing else matters, honey. We just need to fill your cup again, and that's okay.
mhm,
She just held him until he was like, okay, I'm good now. Um,
mhm,
and it's like, we think about it as adults. What do we do when we feel empty? Like when we take a mental day, we take a break, we go for a long drive, go for a run, whatever it is, but we have something. And so, like in that moment, she was teaching her child how to,
mhm.
it's okay to just stop everything else. refill, you know?
Yeah, and that's like the most perfect co-regulation, story ever, right? Where she's like, "I'm gonna lend you my calm right now. I'm gonna help you fill up." And yeah, it's like, like so those kind of struggling, like when kids are struggling or having stress behaviors, right? And so the thing that counteracts the stress behavior, which I learned from this this book called Self-Reg, that was that it's like it's oxytocin, right? Whatever you can do to release oxytocin just helps to reduce the stress response. And so for kids can be different things, right? So some kids need the hug, they need touch, right? Some kids who are sensory averse, like the touch is triggering. So we need to figure out something else. Like, so what is the thing that helps soothe your child, right? And so whatever it is that feels soothing is oxytocin releasing. Like, could be a soothing voice, it could be music, it could be an animal. Like, I don't know. I started paying attention to this, and when I pet my dog, I have this like lovely lab. She's very calm. As soon as I start petting her, I like feel something different and physiologically going on, and I was like, oh, that is my oxytocin. Like, interesting. Like you can really, or like even when I hug my son, I started to pay attention. What am I feeling in my body? And you can feel it. It just feels like this kind of warm, fuzzy feeling, that
Yeah.
that calms. It's like it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It's that opposite of the, fight or flight,
Yeah, and
freeze,
it's
fib,
interesting,
all that stuff.
today, so I have some high school students in Montgomery County Public Schools RISE program, and I took them over to the courthouse today just to, check things out. And we wound up meeting somebody in a little training and for interns and kids, and they had the therapy dog, and
Oh,
that's
yeah.
that they bring to court for
So great.
when
Oh my
victims,
gosh.
need to testify,
Yeah.
and they can just sit and pet the dog out.
Yeah.
If it's really, really hard, the dog is trained to go sit in the witness box, like underneath at the person's feet, so that the dog's always there. And it's just, I'm so happy that people are realizing what,
Yeah.
like that we can offer that, because it's stressful for everyone. And
Yes.
yeah, that you say that just, yeah, petting the dog. Some people say watching fish,
Yeah. That's
like
really calming. Yeah, watching, like, sometimes it's, like we had my son had all these fidget things, like that one with like the bubbles where you like squeeze it and they go up and around, they turn colors, or like the sand that goes down, and like those are soothing things, right? It's like sort of has a meditative impact on the brain.
yeah.
Um, so
And
yeah.
it's always interesting, like how kids need different. Like I was saying earlier about, my older one who needs like the small tight places. Sometimes, sometimes when
Mhm.
she gets dysregulated, she needs me to just hold her.
Mhm.
And it's like I have to find that fine line. Like usually I give her some time, and then I'll go up and I'll hug her, and she'll try to fight me off, and then I'll tickle her, and then that usually solves it.
Mhm.
Or sometimes she'll fight me off and I'll get up to walk away, and then she'll like, no, like,
Uh-huh.
like
Right.
it's that struggle of she
Yeah.
wants to not need me because she's mad at me,
Right.
but she needs me,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we figure it out. But, it's a lot. I had somebody, I think it was last week on the show, about, we were talking about how, parenting is, we got to grow ourselves and learn how to regulate ourselves a lot, because it's,
Yes.
the kids feel it. And as they rise, if you rise, you're just getting into this, everybody
Yeah.
rising. And
100%. Yeah, that's the other thing we talk to parents a lot about, because, I imagine you've seen that brain model, that like Dan Siegel hand brain model. So it's like this is the brain. Here I am in the camera, and that this is the prefrontal cortex right in front, and and this is the stuff that keeps our brain online, right, and like keeps us from like not screaming at everyone who walks by us, or like crying all the time, or whatever. It keeps us getting from point A to point B to point C without like flipping out all the time. And our kids are usually walking around like half upregulated, right? Like their prefrontal cortex is, first of all, not fully developed. And so a lot of times, so this part underneath is like the amygdala, that part that like, makes us have those big reactions. And um, when we offer our kids the blue cup and the red cup, and they're here, it's really easy to flip right up there. And now I'm like right here in this, like they are in this, well, I'm not, but they're in this place where they're just like, in their reptilian brain, where they are just like completely not, just in meltdown mode. And then what happens with our brains is that then we have mirror neurons, right? So our brain sees that and wants to go there too, right? Because this is biologically like, oh, there's a lion, right? So like,
right.
like they must be flipping out because we're about to get attacked. This is really unsafe. but actually, it's just the blue cup and it's not unsafe. And so our prefrontal cortex is fully developed, can like override that mirror neuron desire to go up there. But sometimes it's hard. Like if we haven't had our coffee yet, if we're tired, if, all the things that are like, making us not as regulated as possible work out of here. And then it's easy to flip up there too. And so whatever we can do to kind of help find our kind of tools to regulate, and it can be small things like, as we always tell parents about this too, like find a little mini thing that like helps fill your cup and gets you, back to whatever metaphor you want to use, fill your cup, charge your battery, whatever, even if it's just a little bit, so that you're not depleted when you're dealing with a kid who's really struggling, because then nothing works.
Yeah. And having, like, my husband and I, for those that are in a, 2-person raising the child, like having a tap out. I don't know why I use tap out all the time, but like, having a tap out, and it'll be like, Seth will come to me and be like, I'm about to explode. I'm like, I got it, go. And he can go walk out and go for a walk, go do what he needs to do. I just take over with the kids. Cause like sometimes like we're adults too, but we can't always regulate. There's times where I'm 100%. Like, I'm done. I'm out.
Yeah.
And so Steph will take over and I'll go do what I need to do. Like usually it has to do with water because I'm a water person, but take a shower or whatever it is to get myself back and like, okay, now I'm regulated. Now let's have this conversation again.
And that's actually also really good modeling for the kids. Like, when we realize there's something, I need a break right now, right? Like my brain's not doing well right now. So I need to take care of my brain. So I'm going to go take care of my brain by going outside or going to take a shower, that, and I think, kudos to your husband for realizing, and to you, also, for realizing like when, that's really hard for some parents to kind of realize until, all of a sudden we're screaming. We're like, whoa, how'd we get here? And which happens also, by the way, like everyone does. Like we always joke. I was like, if you're doing it awesome 30% of the time, like you're good,
Yeah, exactly.
But I think some of it is that being able to recognize, and sometimes I can see it in my husband. I'm like I'll tap him out. So sometimes you can
exactly. We'll see it.
Yeah, we can work
the steam.
Yeah, right. It's like coming out of his ears, right? Exactly. And I'm like, okay, I don't know that you're understanding what's happening just yet. So sometimes I'll tap him out, and that works out too. But yeah, it's and as long as you can set that, the most important thing is just like make that clear in a different time. Like, hey, let's just make sure that like if I need a break, I'm just going to tell you. If you need a break, tell me. Like it's cool. Like he's a lot, and my son's a lot, and and it can get overwhelming. And I think it's practice. It takes a lot of practice.
Yeah, and it's understanding yourself and understanding your child and giving yourself grace.
100%. Yes. And you know what? And then the other thing that's great is that then we model repairing. Like if we made a mistake, then you just say like, oh yeah, I'm sorry. Like I don't know, I really yelled, and did not mean to yell, and I'm sorry that I yelled. I'm going to try harder not to yell next time. I just, I didn't notice my brain was getting that upset. We use a lot of your brain language, and I try to help parents use it too, because a lot of that I think also helps kids sort of divorce their sense of self from what's happening in their brain, right? And so like so it's just like a little bit less judgy in some way, when I'm like, your brain has a hard time with loud sounds, right? And your brain is having a hard time right now with what's going on. Sometimes I'll say you're having a hard time. I say that a lot too, but kind of that idea of understanding like, okay, this isn't like the entirety of me. Like this is how my brain is working, and just kind of putting that language in a lot is really helpful. And so like one of the things that we say to my son a lot, so he's autistic, he's a speaker, he's like he was speech delayed, and we joke that he is making up for lost time now.
I do the same about my daughter. She's speech delayed, and she doesn't stop.
I was like, okay. Like he talks to himself. He talks to like anyone. Like talk to like, it doesn't really matter. Yeah.
And mine even talks in her sleep. So,
that's amazing. Yeah. But no, I lost my train of thought. What I was going to say with the talking. I don't know. Anyway, but he, I don't know what I was just going to say. Something about when he was,
He's
one
very
of the things. Oh,
important.
here's one thing. Yeah, here it is. I got it. I retrieved it. He was having a big. So when he has meltdowns, they're very explosive. They're loud. They're he's moving. He sometimes kicks things. He doesn't usually hurt people, but sometimes he will if they're in the way. And so he's an exploder, not an imploder. And so he we've taught him a little bit about like your brain is trying to trick you. You got like a tricky brain. Sometimes your tricky brain is telling you that, the only way to do X or Y or Z is this, and so we need to help your brain understand that there's different ways to do this. Um, so we talk about, he's like, my brain tricked me again,
Love it.
which is nice because then he's sort of like, okay, it's not that I'm like a horrible human being. Like I
No,
can't.
I
Yeah.
haven't heard that before, and I love that because
Yeah.
it's not, like it brings me back to like one of the things is like, oh, I'm so bad. Like, no, you're not. Sometimes you
No.
make bad choices, but
Mhm.
you're not bad. And so saying the brain, okay, it's just your
Mhm.
brain doing that. It's not you as the whole.
Mhm.
Such
Yeah,
a
and the other like one that we have people I always tell people to tattoo on their arms is like, my kid's not, and this is definitely not one I made up. None of these things are things I've made up. I just pilfered them. But it's that your child's not giving you a hard time. Your child's having a hard time.
yeah.
And so that having a hard time, I say that to my son all the time. Well, actually, so he just started school. He goes to Ivy Mount, which is a extended school
I
year
think
school, and they just went back yesterday, and he needed 3.5 weeks off, which was nice. And we were away on vacation last week, and like the last 3 days of vacation, he was like, every little thing was sending him into meltdown mode, and I was like, what is going on? And then like little, like it's like peeling an onion sometimes, he like mentioned something about going to school, and I was like, oh, are you worried about going back to school? And I was like, yeah, it's like, yeah, that's, and so once we sort of figured that out, we were able to, so I was like, oh yeah, you're having a hard time with the idea of going back. And so I kept validating him for that. And I think that explained things so much more, and I think once we can help them figure out the like things that are causing anxiety, which in turn triggers his OCD and triggers, like his
right.
reactivity and all the things, that's so helpful for him. And, we also teach, like I've been talking to him a lot about his brain in the way that, when your brain is feeling anxious about something or worried about something, then you like to try to control things in your environment. Your brain wants to control things. And so he has like weird fixations with other people and things he cannot control, which is always a futile, like, you
Right.
know, um, exercise. And so, like, for a while, he was really obsessed with phones, with iPhones. And so if he saw someone with like, an iPhone 8, he was like, it would make him very upset. He's like, you need to upgrade. And especially, and he would sometimes be like, oh, you have the 8 when he's regulated. Like, that's interesting. Why would you have the 8 still? And that gets the
Right.
story. But when he's dysregulated or anxious, then, he starts to get very judgy and wanting to control things. And lately it's been like people's makeup, what people are wearing. I mean, he gets really deep into weird things. Um, so he like, tells his teeth, if he sees someone wearing fake eyelashes, this is a trigger for him to like try to see that that's not a good choice. Like, I was like, that's a fine choice, Max. It's like up to them. We can't control other people's bodies. But anyway, but it's interesting. So I'm trying to explain, we've been explaining to him that part about their brains and so about his brain. And I think whenever you can help kids understand their brain more, it um, helps with acceptance more, but it also helps with finding the solutions more. Like, oh yeah, my brain is trying to do this now. Okay, I see that.
Yeah, I
So
like
that's
that.
kind of
I would
some of the
say, okay, that's my
strategies.
tip. I just I say it all the time about the show is that like I started the show to inform parents of what's out there. And as a parent myself, like I'm like, oh wait, I can use that at home.
Yeah.
I learned a lot myself. And like I have an undergraduate degree in early childhood, a master's in special ed. I was 7 years in the classroom, 2 years as special ed coordinator. I've been an education attorney for 13 years.
Hmm.
Like even with all of my training and all of my knowledge and everything, guess what? I still have so much to learn,
Hmm.
because every child's different. And that's why I love having people on the show that even though we've had parent coaching, everyone is different and everyone has that different angle.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that's my one that I'm taking away from this from this
Oh,
show.
good.
Yeah, it's like it's your brain trying to trick you. I like that.
Yeah.
So I know you said that you and Gabrielle have the course, but how else do you help parents? Like, what other services do you provide?
Yeah, we have a few other ones. So we have, we also just recently started in this past year, we started offering some support groups for parents of neurodivergent teens, which has been great. And that's just kind of just a straight up support group, and we run them in sessions. So we have another one. We have one that we're wrapping up now, and we have another one that will come up in the fall. And then we also do lots of webinars often, like we've done webinars on executive functioning, on dealing with sort of siblings of neurodivergent kids, kind of how do you support the siblings? Um, how do you talk to your kids about their diagnosis? Like all kinds of sort of special topics that we do as webinars. We also offer one-to-one coaching if parents want kind of more individualized support. And then we offer for people who have come through our either through the individual coaching via packages or through the parent, through our what we call the core course, the practical strategies class. We offer a membership. So that is either month to month or yearly. And that's like, we have 2 just kind of Q&A sessions a month. Come and bring your, wins and your issues, and we'll help you problem solve and find community and remember, kind of reminders of all the things that we forget, because we go back to our sort of like old habits. And we also do, part of our membership is also we send out articles. We do these webinars are free for all our members and things like that. So we're trying to also figure out ways to kind of get so lots of people are local. Most of our folks are local, but there's lots of people who come from elsewhere. But for the large majority of the local people, we're trying to figure out ways to also kind of get people together to kind of physically in person, in real life, as they say. So those are kind of all the things we offer at, we also have a great blog that Gabrielle mostly writes, and she's excellent. Always really good tips. And that's all on our website, so people can sign up on and register there.
And what's your
Get on
website?
our mailing list. It's just raisingorchidkids.com, all one word.
And I know we'll have the link when
Mm-hmm.
the full version comes out. This
And we do have, I just want to say we do have our next class is coming up in the fall. So we have our core course. Our next one starts in late September.
Oh, that's great.
So
All right, awesome. This has been so enlightening, and I love it because learning new tricks for home life. And I hope our listeners learn some new things of how to help, whether you're a parent or a teacher or both, whatever it may be. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. This was great. I enjoyed it.
You've been listening to Stress-Free IEP with your host, Frances Shefter. Remember, you do not need to do it all alone. You can reach Frances through shefterlaw.com, where prior episodes are also posted. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing the show with others through YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more.